Hello and welcome to the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture Trade and Consumer Protection Slow the Spread presentation. Slow the Spread is a coordinated effort to limit the spread of spongy moth, a defoliating exotic insect also referred to as Lymantria dispar. In our work, we inspect nursery stock and Christmas trees, lumber, logs, and other agricultural commodities that may need to be certified as being free of regulatory pests and diseases. The goal of the spongy moth inspections and certifications is to protect forest health by eliminating the human-aided spread of spongy moth and its negative impacts. After this training, you'll be better equipped to help identify spongy moth and help protect Wisconsin forests. Today we'll cover some spongy moth history in North America, learn about the spongy moth life cycle and how to identify its life stages, what plants they like to feed on and the damage they do, where to look for spongy moth and how to treat if necessary, and spongy moth quarantine regulations and how they comply with those regulations.
The subspecies of spongy moth that is present in Wisconsin is native to Europe. The spongy moth was introduced into Medford, Massachusetts in 1869 by an amateur French scientist named Trouvelot. He was attempting to breed the spongy moth with a silkworm in hopes of producing a hardier silkworm. The two insects were not compatible and some moths escaped. He warned local officials of the potential consequences but was ignored. In 1882, the area experienced its first outbreak of spongy moth on his street. The same year, he moved back to France. Spongy moth has been spreading ever since. Check out the map of the northeastern U.S. showing spongy moth's progression over the past 150 plus years. Wisconsin's 2025 male moth trap catch map on the right shows a graphic representation of the leading edge of the current infestation. Note that the white area in eastern Wisconsin doesn't denote the lack of spongy moth, just a lack of trapping data since we concentrate our traps along the leading edge of the infestation and don't place traps in counties where the pest is well established.
Next, we look at the life cycle of the spongy moth and learn to identify it in all its life stages. On the left side of the slide, you'll see a drawing of spongy moth's life cycle, which is comprised of 4 stages: adult moths, egg masses, caterpillars, or larvae if you're talking about more than one, and pupa, which is the term for the cocoon stage of moths. On the right side of the slide, you'll see a temporal depiction of spongy moth life cycle. It is the caterpillars or larvae that do the feeding damage that we're concerned with. This feeding damage is also called defoliation. Spongy moth eggs hatch in the spring and caterpillars emerge and begin feeding. There are 5 to 6 instars or stages of spongy moth larval development. There are 5 stages for male caterpillars, 6 for female caterpillars. By the end of June, caterpillars, having finished feeding on tree leaves from pupa, will emerge as moths in late July. Female moths then send out a pheromone scent to attract a male moth. Male moths will use their feathery antennae to detect the pheromone and find a mate. Once mated, the female moth will seek a protected area and lay her eggs packed in a small felt-like or spongy clump of cells called an egg mass. Each female will lay only one egg mass in her lifetime. Both male and female moths die within a couple of weeks after emerging from their pupal case. The egg masses can survive through the winter, and then the cycle repeats. Spongy moth eggs are clustered in what is commonly called an egg mass. Egg masses are caramel colored and are usually about the size of a U.S. quarter. That may seem small, but each egg mass can contain from 100 to 1,000 eggs. Egg masses can be found on just about anything that is exposed to the outside environment, such as firewood, pulpwood, and other items, logs, trailers, campers, and patio furniture, just to name a few. If those items are infested and moved, it can spread spongy moth long distances into uninfested areas. The egg mass is what you should be looking for in the fall, winter, and early spring when inspecting articles prior to shipment. Egg masses should be scraped and destroyed if detected. The spongy moth larva or caterpillar is the life stage that does the damage to the trees and shrubs. They are very hairy and distinctive sets of paired blue and brick red spots on their backs. The first instar caterpillar starts out quite small, hatching from the egg mass and crawling up into the crown of shrubs or trees, where on a windy day they can let out a silken thread to be blown for long distances. As they keep feeding, they grow and shed their skin multiple times. The hairs of spongy moth larvae can cause rashes and intensify respiratory problems in people, so it is best to wear gloves if you need to touch them. The spongy moth pupal case is an inch in length and is brown to black in color. Pupation occurs in midsummer and represents the transition between caterpillar and adult. It is often found attached to the bark of the tree and close to a new egg mass. It produced a flightless female moth. Adult spongy moths' purpose is to mate and lay eggs to build populations. They get together after a female moth produces a chemical pheromone that attracts males to her. The adult female moths are whitish and larger than brownish spongy moth males. While European female spongy moths cannot fly, a closely related Asian subspecies with flighted females has been introduced into the ports in North America several times. Once a male moth hone in on a female moth, they mate. Female moths then find a sheltered area in which they lay their eggs. After mating, adults die within a couple of weeks. Here are two pictures of female moths in the act of egg laying. They will lay their eggs on just about anything, especially somewhere that is sheltered from the elements that is near a food source for their offspring. Now we will learn about spongy moth hosts and the damage they can cause. Spongy moth caterpillars or larvae will feed on the leaves of up to 300 species of trees and shrubs, but they prefer feeding on oak, willow, aspen, birch, basswood, tamarack, and apple. This feeding or defoliation can stress trees and shrubs and make them more vulnerable to attack from other pests or diseases, like root rot pathogens that are already present in the soil and just waiting to attack and possibly kill stressed trees. A single spongy moth defoliation of a conifer, like Norway spruce, can kill those trees. Spongy moth caterpillars tend to avoid ash, Scots pine, balsam fir, and locust, but remember that adult moths could lay their eggs on those species anyway. Unchecked spongy moth outbreaks can lead to defoliation events that not only reduce tree health and wildlife habitat, but also have negative economic events. Economic losses can lead to tree mortality and lost tourism during especially large outbreaks. Next, we'll look at how to conduct spongy moth inspections along with a few limited treatment options. Remember, when looking for egg masses, that they could be almost anywhere. They could be on mature trees. They could be on saplings. They could be on trailers, logging equipment, and even truck tires if you catch them in the act. They could basically be on any surface or nook and cranny in or around a woodlot. When looking for spongy moth egg masses, please note that even isolated islands of landscape trees can support large number of egg masses. So be sure to check your surroundings for spongy moth life stages. And don't presume that trees that are not in a woodlot won't be infested. In the forest setting, you will want to look for egg masses on the trunk and especially on the undersides of tree limbs. If you find one, there may very well be more to find. When you find egg masses during inspections of nursery stock or individual logs, they could be sprayed with golden pest spray oil or you can physically remove them. The egg mass may crumble when scraping it, so have a can or other receptacle ready. Be sure not to let any untreated eggs fall on the ground, as some of them may still hatch in the spring. Please note that stomping on the egg mass won't hurt it one bit. Be sure to remove and destroy any stage of spongy moth that you find. Egg masses and pupal cases can be scraped off and thrown in warm soapy water overnight and then placed in the garbage. The larvae and adults may be stepped on or drowned in soapy water. Be sure to report the find if you're working in an area not known to be infested with spongy moth. Next, we will cover some regulations related to spongy moth, including quarantine restrictions and steps you can take to see that the articles you are handling can be certified as free of spongy moth. When we talk about a plant pest quarantine, we are basically talking about a set of rules that apply to specific regulated articles in a certain area with a known pest problem. For example, in Wisconsin, the spongy moth quarantine covers approximately the eastern three-fourths of the state. Items that are exposed to the environment in the quarantine are then regulated by specific rules and may not leave the quarantine until certain conditions are met. For example, a grower of Christmas trees in eastern Wisconsin may not ship trees to western Wisconsin unless the trees have been inspected and found to be free of spongy moth egg masses. Companies that wish to legally ship out of the quarantine also need to sign and follow an agreement with either USDA or DADCAP.
A compliance agreement is needed by companies that move regulated articles from infested quarantine areas to non-quarantine areas. Companies that ship out of the quarantine and to other states will need to sign a federal compliance agreement with USDA APHIS. Companies that ship out of the quarantine but don't ship to other states will need to sign a state agreement with DADCAP. The map on the left shows the shaded counties quarantined for spongy moth in the United States. The map on the right shows the quarantine counties in Wisconsin in red, with Greene and Sawyer County most recently added in 2026. Although spongy moth has been detected in every county in Wisconsin, populations are not considered established in the unquarantined western county. Please pause and take a moment to determine if shipping from quarantine areas to non-quarantine areas is part of your regular business practices. If so, you'll want to contact USDA APHIS or DADCAP to make sure your business is compliant. Contact information will be available at the end of this presentation.
As mentioned previously, if your business ships regulated articles like plant products out of the spongy moth quarantine, you should get a compliance agreement. Loggers and certain plant growers that ship out of the quarantine but not out of state should sign a compliance agreement with DADCAP. Loggers and certain plant growers that ship out of the quarantine and to other states need to sign an agreement with USDA APHIS. Compliance agreements spell out what type of risk reduction is required to prevent the spread of spongy moth. Compliance agreements are renewed annually. There is no fee for a compliance agreement or for the spongy moth identification training like the one you're receiving here. Once you have a compliance agreement in place, you can refer to it for the specifics on what you'll need to do to reduce the risk of spreading spongy moth. Depending on your business, this may include inspection of individual pieces, heat treatment, or field inspections, just to list a few examples. Once your particular requirements are met, you're free to affix a stamp, sticker, shield logo, or equivalent to your product to facilitate the shipment of your regulated article outside the spongy moth quarantine. Now let's talk about what you actually do on the ground to help prevent the spread of spongy moth. What can you do about it? Get in the habit of looking for spongy moth life forms and removing and destroying them when you find them. Also, please report finds to DADCAP, especially if you're in non-quarantine areas. Follow the requirements of your compliance agreement and remember to certify that your shipment has been inspected and found free of all spongy moth life forms. Always carry proper documentation and remember to keep a copy of your compliance agreement handy when conducting business. In addition to your compliance agreement, additional documentation may also be needed for specific loads. Depending on what you're handling and what your compliance agreement says, you will likely need some additional documentation. The following slides will provide some examples. Here we have the USDA 540. These are triplicate forms usually issued by government inspectors. These are used for specific load of regulated articles that has been inspected and is found to be free of spongy moth. An alternate form of documentation is the USDA 530 or limited permit. Limited permits are most often inspected by logging or transport companies moving pulpwood. Pulpwood may be allowed to leave the quarantine without a specific inspection, provided extra processing is conducted in a timely manner of the destination. Companies often issue their own limited permits once they have a compliance agreement. An accurate statements is used for logs inspected by foresters or loggers that have received spongy moth identification training. Participating in a training like this one and holding a current and valid compliance agreement can make you eligible to issue accurate statements. If you have regulated articles out of the quarantine but not out of state, you will need to get signed up with DADCAP compliance agreement every year. Once you have an agreement and have been trained to identify spongy moth, you can issue your own DADCAP inspection statements like this one seen here for every load leaving the quarantine. The receiving facility should also have a compliance agreement that spells out how they are to handle those regulated articles. Please reach out to USDA or DADCAP if you have any questions about the presentation, spongy moth, or quarantine regulations. Since the presentation is being given virtually, please open your browser once you are finished watching this video and navigate the URL on the slide or scan the QR code. Enter your contact info and complete the short quiz to verify that you have completed spongy moth identification training. Within 2 weeks of completing the online quiz, you'll receive a certified spongy moth ID training card and ID number via mail or email, along with an inspection statement that can be copied for your use. Thank you for attending our Spongy Moth training today. Have a great day.